Okay, so we will see the next part of this lecture of humanitarian law, treatment of prisoners of wars. This was in continuation to the last lecture that we have seen, the Geneva Convention of 1949 and Geneva Convention of 1929. Now, in continuation to that, we also see the treatment of prisoners of war. So, what was the objectives of Geneva Convention? That is for the amelioration of the treatment of those who are wounded, who are sick persons, and who are the part of the war, and who are not the part of the war, but they have been affected by the wars. And we also seen that there was steps taken by the international community, and in which United Nations Conference in 1968 they have tried to make a concrete provisions regarding the effects of warfare, and there should be some legal provision, legal drafting for the states which are the part of the war. Now, in condition to that, there are certain other protocols that Geneva Convention, even after the 1968, it has taken certain protocols regarding protection and care of wounded and sick persons, because the effects of this war, they are more on the persons who are wounded and who are sick. Then it also protection to medical units and establishment of materials and vehicles. That was another protocol has been taken after that steps of the Geneva Convention. So protection and care of wounded and sick persons, it was decided that the sick and wounded persons of the armed forces in the field and at sea, they shall be respected, they shall be protected and cared for the sickness, for their betterness, and they should be cared by the belligerents in whose power they shall be. Now, the belligerents who are also the part of the war, they are being given the provision for protection of the wounded persons. Then there should not be any discrimination founded on sex, race, nationality, religion, political opinions or similar tastes for the sake of humanity. Then another provision that was being held in this protection and care of wounded and sick persons, that is any attempt upon their lives or violence to their persons or body, they should be strictly prohibited. They shall not willfully be left without medical assistance, and women shall be treated with all consideration due to their sex. They should not be harassed. And if a party to the conflict is compelled to abandon them to the enemy, so far as military exigencies permits, they leave behind with them a portion of his medical personnel to assist in taking care of them. So these are the provisions that have been made for care of wounded and sick persons. The another protocol that has been decided, that is protection of medical units, establishments, materials and vehicles. Now, mobile medical units and fixed establishment of the medical services for providing facilities to the sick and wounded persons, that must be respected and protected by the belligerents. Similarly, persons engaged in providing facilities to the sick and wounded persons to take care of them. Such vehicles which are used in the wartime, that should be protected. They also need certain care and maintenance that should be done by the belligerents. And the Geneva Convention recognized the emblems of Red Cross Society in this protocol. the red crescent on the red lion or red sun on a white ground as a distinctive emblem. So this was the main thing that has been procured, that such emblem will protect the vehicles, medical staff and those who are for the protection of such belligerents or wounded and sick persons, and they should not be treated as enemy by any of the state which is indulged in wartime, right? So this was the Red Cross insignia that shall be respected and that shall be given immunity so long they are genuinely and legitimately used. Then another protocol, that is treatment of dead bodies. This again is a part of human life which is too much of the honor and respect and traditions and customs. So after this Geneva Convention, this has been also discussed that the treatment of dead bodies should be done according to the dignity. Dead bodies shall not be disgracefully treated, and in particular they shall not be mutilated. They shall be collected and buried or cremated on the battlefield by the victor. Belligerents are also required to take measures to search for the dead and prevent their disposal. So this was also the part of this protocol. Now let us come on the treatment of prisoners of war. This is important section for our subject. So what is the protocol? What are the provisions that been prescribed for treatment of prisoners of war under the international humanitarian law? Here the prisoners of war is a status which is given to the person captured by the belligerent during the war and in an armed conflict. આપણે કોને કહીએ છીએ? યુદ્ધ કૈદી કે જે આક્રમક વ્યક્તિ દ્વારા અરેસ્ટ કરવામાં આવ્યું અને એ પછી કૈદી બની જાય છે. જે દેશના તાબામાં એ આવી જાય એને આપણે પછી એ દેશ એને કૈદી તરીકે ટ્રીટ કરે છે. So here the prisoners, they are such persons captured by the belligerents and during the war and or in any armed conflict. So all the persons captured by the belligerents do not acquire this status. So there are certain specifications whether they are war prisoners or they are not war prisoners. Here Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war of August 12, 1949 lays down under Article 4 that certain categories of persons who have fallen into the power of enemy shall be known as prisoners of war. So this is the question, that who will be the prisoners of war and who are not. So they are firstly members of the armed forces of belligerents as well as the members of military or volunteer corps forming the part of the armed forces. They acquire the status of prisoners of war when they captured with or while performing their normal military duties during the course of hostilities. Secondly, the members of other military and other volunteer corps, including the organized resistance movements, if they have commanders, if they wear a distinct uniform, or if they carry arms openly, or if they observe laws and customs of the war, so they will also be treated as the prisoners of war. Right? So these are the categories which should be treated as the prisoners of for this particular treatment. Now thirdly, non-combatant persons, that is civilian personals, such as correspondents, supply contractors, laborers, cooks, barbers, engineers, and provided that they accompany the armed units under authority, they should also be treated as the treatment of prisoners of war law. because they are associated with the war times and the army of that particular country, but they are not the part of the war. So that is the reason, but they should also be treated respectfully and protected under the laws of humanitarian law by the belligerents. Now, fourthly, the members of crews, including masters, pilots, and apprentices who do not benefit by more favorable treatments under any laws, take up arms and to resist the invading force without having had time to form themselves into regular armed units, provided that they carry arms openly and they respect the laws and customs of war. So they should also be treated as the prisoners of war for the treatment of this international humanitarian law. The above implies that persons such as traitors, deserters, mercenaries, and those members of the armed forces who has concealment of hostilities, they are founded within the territory of the enemy, do not acquire the status of prisoners of war. So such persons who are not the actual part or who are not connected to the suppliers or supporters of the armed forces, they should not be treated as the status of prisoners of war. So they should not be treated under this law. So they can be the part of common law or municipal law as per the policy of that particular nation. But if they are captured by the belligerents, then they should be respected, and their protection is also the important concern. So this is what the prisoners of war classification, whether what person should be treated as the prisoner of the war and what should not be treated as the prisoner of the war for the purpose of application of this particular Geneva Convention, right? Or the provisions of treatment of prisoners of war. So international law protects the prisoners from punishment for their hostile acts committed prior to the capture. Main reason is that they should be protected because they are the part of the armed forces and they have to follow the orders of the superior. So personally they are not responsible for the act done by their duties. So they are following their responsibilities. They have been guaranteed various privileges during the captivity. Once the claim of a prisoner of being a prisoner of war is recognized, the captor state is not free to enforce its own municipal law or policy except as permitted by the international law. So see, here it is made clear that once the person has been declared as a prisoner of war, the captor state shall not treat him as per the municipal laws. That means he should be treated only under the provisions given under treatment of prisoners of war as per the Geneva Convention, right? So this is what the reason that there are certain differences between the treatment of the prisoners of war and treatment of the civilians. Now we should also see that wounded and sick persons and civilian persons under the Geneva Convention or under the humanitarian law. So protection to civilian population. The horrifying experiences of a long series of violence, brutality and terror directed by the armed forces against the civilian population made it necessary to provide protection to the civilian persons in the times of war. So there are certain provisions which are also for the civilian persons, whether they are captured by the captor state or they are in conflict with the armed forces because of certain circumstances. Treatment of the occupational of the inhabitant of the occupied territory. When the territory of enemy comes under the control of the belligerents, it is called the belligerent occupation. So Oppenheim defines occupation as invasion plus taking possession of enemy country for the purpose of holding it at any rate temporarily, and the above definition reveals that the establishment of the administration and the actual control in the occupied part are the determining factor in this regards. So here again, occupation of the enemy territory is one of the aims of the war, because every that state who is making aggression want to occupy the territory of the another state for the victory of the war. So that's why the civilians or other occupants, inhabitants, they should also be treated under the humanitarian law. Now there are certain limitations of means and methods to use the force. So that should also be regarded as Additional Protocol 1 of 1977. In order to make the warfare less brutal and inhuman, stated that the rights of the parties to the conflicts to adopt methods and means of warfare are not unlimited. And the protocol in this direction made a number of provisions, which includes the certain provisions that employment of weapons, projectiles, materials and methods of warfare which cause superfluous and injury or unnecessary sufferings to the human beings, they should be prohibited. The employment of such methods or means of warfare which are intended or may be repeated to cause widespread, long-term and severe damage to the neutral environment, they should be prohibited. To kill, injure or capture an adversary by resort to perfidy is prohibited. Attack against a person parachuting from an aircraft in distress is prohibited. Attack against an enemy, horse-day combat is also prohibited. You may be knowing this case of Abhinandan, right? That during the surgical strike on Balakot. So you may be heard about that. That a person, attack against a person parachuting from a aircraft in distress is prohibited. So that's why he has been extradited respectfully by the Pakistan to India. So it is again, these are certain limits and limitations on the means and methods of use of the force that international law has been has imposed on the states which are the part of the war and which are not the part of the war. It is to be noted that the work in this direction continued even after the adoption of Protocol 1 of 1977 and the United Nations Conference on Prohibitions and Restrictions of the Use of Certain Conventional Weapons. They deemed to be excessively injurious or such have indiscriminative effects adopted by the Convention of October 1981, and the provisions are being implied. Now let us see law on non-international armed conflicts. Law on non-international armed conflicts. So international, we have seen certain international provisions under the international humanitarian law. Now let us see the law on non-international armed conflicts where they may not be the part of international war between the states. So here non-international conflicts or the internal armed conflicts, they are referred to those conflicts which take place in the territory of the state between its armed forces and dissidents armed forces or other organized armed forces. That also you are aware recently in the Chhattisgarh, the Naxalites have made attack on Indian Army Jawan, right? You know that more than 20 of the Indian soldiers, they have lost their lives because of these internal armed conflicts. And in our country, it very frequently happens that the Naxalites, then some such aggressive fronts, they are active in our country, and they make attack on Indian Air Force, Indian Police, and this is what the internal aggression or internal conflicts between the state. That the civil war, civil strife, then threshold internal conflicts, they are included in the non-international armed conflicts, and they should also be treated under the international humanitarian law. The provisions only will be applicable and not the jurisdiction will be applicable under international laws. They are presently and most frequent type of the conflicts which take a heavier toll on civilians. In recent years, such conflicts have broken out or erupted in number of states including Angola, Guinea, Bissau, Kosovo, Costa Rica, Ethiopia, and these are also they have such internal armed conflicts. So all the four Geneva Conventions of 1949 that we have seen in the last lecture, under Article 3, regulated the conduct of non-international armed conflicts by providing that in case of armed conflict of not of an international character occurring in the territory of one of the high contracting parties, each party to the conflict shall be bound to apply as a minimum as following provisions: that the persons taking no active part in the hostilities, including members of the armed forces who had laid down their arms and those placed hors de combat by sickness, wounds, detentions or any other cause, they shall in all circumstances be treated humanly, without any adverse distinction founded on the race, color, religion, faith, sex, birth, wealth, or any such other similar criteria. The violence to life and persons, in particular murder of all kinds, mutilation, cruel treatment, tortures, they should be avoided. Taking of hostages, outrage upon the personal dignity, particular humiliating and disregarding treatment, disgrading treatment should be avoided. So these are the norms that have been also made under the international humanitarian law. So now, dear students, we have completed our first unit under this subject, international humanitarian law. Kindly go through the WhatsApp group. You will get all the links that international humanitarian law has been tagged on it. And under this first unit, we have completed the international movement for humanitization of the warfare, contributions of classified writers, then Red Cross Society, history of Red Cross Society, evolvement, Geneva Conventions of 1864, 1907, 1868, then Geneva Conventions of 1929, 1949, the treatment of prisoners of war, the protection of wounded and sick persons and civilian persons under the international humanitarian law, and such other conventions and declarations that part of the international humanitarian law. Now, first unit we have completed, and we will start the second unit in next lecture. And that second unit is international efforts to outlaw slavery. Okay, ગુલામગીરીના વિરુદ્ધ જેટલા પગલાં લેવામાં આવ્યા છે એ સેકન્ડ યુનિટમાં છે. બધા સ્ટુડન્ટ ખાસ ધ્યાન રાખજો કે અત્યારની જે પરિસ્થિતિ છે આવા કન્ડિશનમાં આપણે એક્ઝામનો અત્યારે કહી ના શકાય, પરંતુ તમને અમે બધા જ જે અસાઇનમેન્ટ લખવા આપેલા છે એ જેટલા ઝડપથી બની શકે એટલા ઝડપથી પૂરા કરો. નેટ પરથી, લાઇબ્રેરીમાંથી, એકબીજાના મટીરિયલમાંથી તમે બધા યુનિટની તૈયારી કરીને અસાઇનમેન્ટ કમ્પ્લીટ કરો, જેથી કરીને તમે એ ટાઈમસર સબમિશન કરી શકશો, કેમ કે એનું ઇન્ટરનલ એક્ઝામિનેશનમાં એક મહત્ત્વનો પાર્ટ છે. સાથે સાથે જે કોઈ ટેકનિકલ રીઝનથી અથવા મિસ કરવાથી વોટ્સઅપ ગ્રુપમાં એમને આ અસાઇનમેન્ટનું પેપર ના મળતું હોય એ લોકો માટે સૂચના આપું છું કે એ જે તે સબ્જેક્ટના, એટલે મારા 2 સબ્જેક્ટ છે ક્રિમિનલ લોમાં, ઇન્ટરનેશનલ હ્યુમેનિટેરિયન લો એન્ડ જુવેનાઇલ ડેલિન્ક્વન્સી. તો જો તમને એ પેપર ના મળતું હોય અસાઇનમેન્ટવાળું, તો પ્રીવિયસ પેપરમાંથી તમે એસપી યુનિવર્સિટીના વેબસાઇટ પરથી ડાઉનલોડ કરી શકો છો પ્રીવિયસ પેપર્સ. એમાંથી કોઈ પણ એક પેપર કમ્પ્લીટ તમારે નોટબુકમાં સોલ્વ કરવાનો, એ તમારું અસાઇનમેન્ટ રહેશે. આ સૂચના ફક્ત એવા લોકો માટે છે જેનું વોટ્સઅપના રીઝનથી કે બીજા કોઈ ટેકનિકલ રીઝનથી અસાઇનમેન્ટનું પેપર ગુમ થઈ ગયું છે, મિસ થઈ ગયું છે. બાકી બધાએ તો મેં જે પેપર આપ્યું છે એ જ પેપર સોલ્વ કરવાનું છે. સાથે સાથે તમે જે કંઈ પેપર સોલ્વ કર્યો છે એ પેપરના બધા ક્વેશ્ચન તમે ફ્રન્ટ પેજ પર લખી કાઢશો, પહેલા પેજ પર, અથવા જો તમારે પહેલાંથી જ લખાઈ ગયું હશે તો એટલીસ્ટ છેલ્લા પેજ પર આખું ક્વેશ્ચન પેપર ઉતારી દેજો, જેથી અમને ખબર પડે કે તમે કયો પેપર સોલ્વ કર્યો છે. યર અને સેમિસ્ટર બધું જ વ્યવસ્થિત લખવાનું, અને જો પોસિબલ હોય તો પ્રિન્ટ કાઢીને ચોંટાડી દેજો. દેટ વિલ બી વેલ એન્ડ ગુડ. તો આવી રીતે અસાઇનમેન્ટ વહેલી તકે તમે કમ્પ્લીટ કરી દેજો. ટૂંકમાં જ અમે એ અસાઇનમેન્ટ સબમિશન માટેની ડેટ જાહેર કરીશું. ઓકે, તો ફર્સ્ટ યુનિટ આપણું કમ્પ્લીટ થઈ ગયું છે એન્ડ વી વિલ સ્ટાર્ટ ધ નેક્સ્ટ યુનિટ ઇન ધ નેક્સ્ટ લેક્ચર. ઓકે, બાય, ટેક કેર.